My name is Ayan and I am 28 years old. I had just been thrown out on Christmas Eve, my own suitcase dumped on the porch like trash, while my sister laughed and my parents locked the door. Snow cut into my bare feet, and every light in our perfect house glowed like it was celebrating my humiliation. They said I wasn't family anymore, that I deserved nothing, not even my father's name. I screamed until my throat burned, and then I saw her. A barefoot woman, trembling, walking straight toward us like she belonged there. The air shifted. My mother went white. My sister stopped laughing. And inside my coat pocket, my phone buzzed with a message I couldn't yet afford to read. Before I continue, tell me your country and the time right now. Christmas always smelled like cinnamon and control in our house. I learned early that love could be measured in seating arrangements. My sister, Hania, sat close to my father's right hand, where the light from the chandelier made her hair look like a halo. My mother angled her chair so she could watch everyone at once, queen of silent corrections. And me? I was placed at the end, near the hallway, where drafts slipped under the door and reminded me I was temporary. No one ever said, "You don't belong." They didn't need to. Belonging was denied in smaller, cleaner ways, my name forgotten when gifts were labeled, my opinions laughed off as dramatic, my grades praised with a shrug, like I'd done a trick, not earned a life. When I was 8, I spilled juice on the tablecloth. My father didn't yell. He just stared at me until my stomach twisted into a knot. Then he dabbed the stain with a napkin and said, calm as prayer, people like us don't make messes. It wasn't about juice. It was about reminding me that I was always one mistake away from being uninvited. Hania learned that lesson differently. She could shatter a glass and my mother would giggle, call her spirited, tell guests she was destined for greatness. I watched it happen and tried to copy it, tried to laugh when my throat wanted to close, tried to shine when I felt like a shadow. But the moment I reached for attention, my mother's eyes would narrow, and her voice would soften into poison. Don't try so hard, Ayan. It's not flattering. So I became useful instead. I carried plates. I fetched coats. I entertained uncles with polite smiles. I absorbed my father's silence like it was weather and told myself that patience was strength. Every holiday photo proved how well I'd learned, my sister centered, my parents framed around her, and me slightly off to the side, close enough to look like family, distant enough to crop out if the story ever changed. The worst part was that I still wanted them. I wanted my father to look at me the way he looked at his business partners, with respect. I wanted my mother's hugs to mean warmth instead of warning. I wanted my sister's laughter to be joy, not a blade. That night, years later, I heard my mother whisper through a cracked door, "He's not really ours," and the hallway turned cold around me. I stood there with my school backpack still on, fingers gripping the strap until it cut. My father answered in a low voice I'd never heard aimed at me, fearful, not harsh. "Not tonight," he said. And my mother replied, "Then when?" The floor seemed to tilt. Christmas never brought peace, only rehearsed perfection. My mother started decorating 2 weeks early, turning the house into a stage for admiration. Gold ribbons, crystal ornaments, and that fake pine scent she sprayed on real trees. The air felt thick with the need to impress. My father used it as an excuse to deliver speeches about family values and our image, while Hania twirled through the living room like she was the season's chosen spirit. Every year, I told myself this one would be different. That maybe they'd see me, finally. But every year, I became invisible the moment the lights turned on. That night, I watched them through the reflection of the window, my father's hand on Hania's shoulder, my mother smiling as if she'd raised angels. I stood at the edge of the frame again, holding a string of lights that didn't work. My mother turned, saw me, and sighed like my existence dimmed the room. "Go check the fuse box," she said. I wanted to tell her I already had. That the lights weren't broken. They were just overloaded, too much current forced through one line until it shorted. But maybe that was the point. Maybe that was me. Dinner was a ritual of pretending. My father carved the roast with his usual sermon about earning blessings. Hania bragged about her internship. My mother told me to pass the salt without looking up. Every laugh, every nod, was timed to avoid silence, the kind of silence where truth could sneak in. Then my father announced, "We'll be signing papers after dinner." My stomach turned. Hania grinned, eyes glittering. My mother's fork paused midair. "It's just formality," my father added, glancing at me. "Family business matters." That phrase, family business, had always been a locked room I wasn't allowed to enter. I nodded, pretending to understand, pretending the phrase didn't burn. Later that night, when they thought I was asleep, I heard them talking in the living room. My father said, "We'll handle him after the holidays." My mother replied, "He won't make a scene. He never does." And my sister laughed, the same soft, rehearsed laugh she'd use a week later when she watched them throw me out. I was 17 the first time my father handed me a pen and said, "Be a man. Sign this." We were sitting in his office, oak desk, thick curtains, the faint smell of old paper and older pride. My mother stood behind him, her perfume sweet and suffocating. Hania sat cross-legged on the couch, pretending to scroll her phone but watching me like she was waiting for me to fail. "What is it?" I asked. "Routine documentation," my father said. "Family matters. Nothing to worry about." I looked down at the papers. My name appeared in clean print beside words I didn't understand: transfer, assignment, trustee. He tapped the line where I should sign, his finger heavy with authority. "You trust your father, don't you?" Those words always sounded like a command, not a question. I hesitated for half a second too long, and my mother's sigh filled the room. "Ayan," she said softly, "don't make everything dramatic. Just sign." So I did. Because obedience was the only currency that ever earned me temporary peace. The pen dragged a little at the end of my name, leaving a scar of ink. My father smiled, patted my shoulder once, too hard, and said, "Good. You did the right thing." That night, I lay awake replaying his tone. Not proud. Relieved. Like a man who had just secured something fragile. Years later, I would see that same folder again on his desk, older, thicker, edges worn like it had lived through too many hands. I recognized my signature on the first page, the same messy drag at the end. But this time, there were new documents clipped behind it, ones I had never seen. And this time, my name wasn't just at the bottom, it was inside the clauses. Contingent beneficiary. Reversionary clause. Non-disclosure to minor heir. The words made my vision blur. My father's voice echoed from memory, "You trust your father, don't you?" I understood, suddenly, that the contract wasn't for my protection. It was for my silence. That was the moment I realized they had started erasing me years before they threw me out. And this Christmas, I could already feel the ink drying on something worse, something I hadn't even seen yet. My father's voice could fill an entire room and still make me feel smaller than a whisper. That winter, his legacy talk began every morning over breakfast, like a sermon for an audience of one. "Ayan, men are judged by what they build," he'd say, slicing through toast like it had personally disappointed him. "By what they leave behind." He wasn't talking to me, though. He was talking to the reflection of himself in the silver teapot, admiring the man who had built everything from nothing. Never mind that he'd inherited half his empire from his father. In his mind, every generation's wealth reset to zero unless it came from him. When he spoke of heirs, his gaze always drifted toward Hania. She'd beam, nodding like a disciple, the perfect echo. "I'll make you proud, Papa." "And me?" I'd sip my tea, pretending the words didn't pierce. Because what he really meant was you were never meant to inherit anything. He once said, "You lack edge, Ayan. Your sister, she's built for power." I laughed. He didn't. "She's decisive," he continued. "You're emotional. Business doesn't need emotion, it needs control." Funny how the man who worshipped control was the one who'd lose it most violently. That December, while the city shimmered with holiday lights, our home turned colder. My father spent hours locked in his study, holding meetings I wasn't allowed to attend. I'd walk past the door and hear names, banks, trusts, lawyers. I once lingered long enough to hear my name followed by the word problem. When he emerged, he'd fix his tie, smile faintly, and say, "You're not ready for responsibility." And maybe I wasn't. But I was ready for truth. The more he hid, the more I started to see the cracks, secret calls at midnight, whispers between my mother and him, Hania's smug smirk whenever they said family business. I knew something was coming. I just didn't know it would arrive wrapped in snow, sealed with betrayal, and branded with my father's favorite word, legacy. That Christmas Eve, when he made his final toast, he raised his glass toward Hania and said, "To the future of our name." He didn't even glance at me. But I was already watching the storm build behind his eyes, and soon, he'd learn that control was the last thing he ever truly had. My mother's cruelty never came with raised voices, it came dressed in silk and strategy. She didn't punish me by shouting. She punished me by pretending I didn't exist. When I'd walk into a room, her eyes would skim past me like I was furniture slightly out of place. When guests were over, she'd speak about our son in the past tense, as if I were an old mistake she'd corrected. She specialized in gentle damage. Once, when I was 16, I overheard her telling a friend, "Ayan has a sensitive temperament. He's fragile." That word landed harder than any insult. Fragile. Like something not worth keeping if broken. I started rehearsing strength for her approval, learning how to mask exhaustion, smile through dismissal, and apologize for simply taking space. But the more I bent myself to fit her image, the more she looked disappointed, as if perfection itself bored her. At Christmas, her charm became weaponized. The house transformed into her stage. She hosted gatherings, not celebrations, and every gesture was designed to impress. She'd pour wine, touch my father's arm, and laugh softly when people complimented our family. The illusion was flawless, until the guests left. Then the silence arrived. Heavy, surgical. "You embarrassed me," she'd whisper, even when I'd said nothing wrong. "How?" I'd ask. She'd smile. "You just did." That December, the quiet turned meaner. I could feel her studying me, as if calculating the exact moment to cut. The night before Christmas Eve, she knocked on my door without waiting for an answer. "Pack some things," she said. "For what?" "Just in case." Her tone was smooth, practiced. I wanted to ask in case of what, but something in her eyes, cold, almost excited, made me stop. I looked past her into the hallway. My father's office light was on. Hania's door was open, I could hear her humming. My mother turned to leave, and before she did, she whispered something that sent frost through my veins. "This year," she said, "you'll finally understand your place." Then she smiled, the same smile she'd wear the next night, when she'd watch them throw me out into the snow. My sister's laughter was never innocent. It had purpose. It was trained. When we were kids, she'd laugh when I cried, softly, curiously, like she was taking notes on how to do it better next time. As adults, she laughed to signal victory. It was her way of marking territory, of reminding me I lived in a world built by her charm and my silence. She could twist my father's temper into affection and my mother's coldness into approval. All she had to do was smile. I once thought she didn't mean harm, that she just didn't know the weight of her words. But by the time we turned 20, I realized she enjoyed the wait. Especially when it crushed me. She would tell guest stories about my mistakes, how I once forgot a client's name, how I almost got expelled from university. None of it true, but truth never mattered to her. Only performance. My mother would scold her in front of people, then later thank her for lightening the mood. A week before Christmas Eve, she found me sitting in the hallway, reading one of Father's old ledgers. She tilted her head and asked, "Looking for proof you matter?" Her tone was so sweet it curdled in my chest. "What are you talking about?" I asked. She grinned. "He's made his decision. You should pack light." The words hit harder than she knew, or maybe exactly as hard as she intended. I asked what decision. She just laughed, leaned close enough for her perfume to sting my eyes, and whispered, "You know you're not really his, right?" I froze. She walked away like she'd merely commented on the weather. That night, I couldn't sleep. I searched old family photos, looking for proof, some resemblance, some trace. Every image looked staged, every smile forced. My mother's hand on my shoulder looked more like restraint than affection. My father's expression beside me was polite, detached. And when the clock struck midnight, I realized Hania's laughter wasn't cruelty, it was inheritance. She had learned it from the best. The next morning, my father's office door was locked again. Behind it, I heard the faint rustle of paper. Something being signed. Something ending. Something that had my name written on it, but not my place. The sound of the lock was louder than the shouting. It clicked once, clean, final, and that was how I knew it was real. Christmas Eve. The lights outside blinked soft gold through the snow, the kind of beauty that mocked you when you were breaking. I stood in the doorway with my suitcase already packed, my life folded neatly by the people who'd decided I didn't deserve to live it anymore. My father's face was unreadable, the kind of calm that comes from conviction, not love. My mother's arms were crossed, her lips painted into a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. Hania sat halfway up the staircase, legs crossed, phone in hand, ready to witness the execution. "You're not well, Ayan," my father said, voice clipped. "You've been unstable." "I'm unstable because you're lying to me," I said. "Stop raising your voice," my mother warned, glancing toward the windows. "You're embarrassing yourself." I looked at my suitcase. My shirt smelled like cedar from the closet. My shoes were still lined up in order. This wasn't spontaneous, it had been planned. "Why?" I asked. "What did I do?" My father's answer came like a gavel, "You refused to listen." My throat tightened. I wanted to argue, to scream, to make them look at me like blood instead of burden, but my mother's eyes said don't. The kind of warning that had controlled me my whole life. So I stood still while my father opened the door. The air that rushed in was a knife, sharp, cold, merciless. "Where will I go?" I asked. My voice cracked. "Anywhere," my mother said softly, almost lovingly. "Just not here." Hania leaned on the banister, smirking. "Merry Christmas, little brother." That's when I broke. I begged once, not because I thought it would work, but because I needed to hear my own voice fight back. "Please," I said. "Don't do this." "I'll." "Enough," my father snapped, and then he closed the door. The lock turned. The silence after it clicked was the longest second of my life. Snow began to fall harder, each flake bright under the porch light. I knocked once, then twice, then harder, until my knuckles stung and the sound of my sister's laughter came from the other side. It wasn't loud. But it was enough. And when the wind cut through my coat, I realized they hadn't just thrown me out of the house, they'd thrown me out of their story. The snow didn't feel cold at first. It felt blank, like a page I'd been erased from. I stepped off the porch barefoot, the shock of ice biting into skin that still believed in warmth. My breath came out in sharp clouds, each one smaller than the last. The street was empty, quiet, too peaceful for the kind of cruelty that had just happened behind that locked door. I turned back toward the house. Every window was glowing with golden light. I could see them moving inside, shadows of the people who had just unmade me. My mother poured wine. My father sat down again, calm as ever. Hania lifted her phone, and I heard the faint sound of her laughter, muffled by glass. It was like watching my own funeral through a window. I knocked again, harder. Not because I thought they'd open it, but because I wanted proof I'd tried. The sound of my fist against the wood was dull, muted by snow and pride. I shouted until my throat burned. "Nothing." Then I realized they weren't waiting for me to leave. They were waiting for me to break. So I did. I screamed every truth I'd swallowed for years, the favoritism, the manipulation, the lie that I was unstable. The words echoed down the street, sharp against the winter air. But all it did was make me sound mad, exactly what they wanted. The wind picked up. I wrapped my arms around myself, shaking, my breath coming fast and white. My feet had gone numb. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but my fingers were too stiff to pull it out. That's when I saw her. At first, I thought the cold was making me hallucinate. A figure at the end of the driveway, walking barefoot through the snow. Her hair was dark, wet, plastered to her face. Her clothes were thin, not made for the weather. But she didn't stumble. She didn't shiver. She walked straight, calm, steady, as if she'd been walking toward this house for a very long time. Something in the way she moved made my mother's silhouette freeze behind the curtain. The woman's bare feet left deep red imprints in the snow, and the closer she came, the heavier the air felt. My father opened the door an inch, probably to shout at her. But the moment his eyes met hers, the door stopped moving. I'd never seen my father afraid, until that moment. She stopped a few feet away from me, the snow curling around her ankles like fog. Her hair clung to her face, but her eyes, God, her eyes, were steady. Not wild, not desperate. Steady, like she'd already lived through the end of the world once and survived it. "Are you all right?" she asked quietly. Her voice was hoarse, but there was something familiar about it, something that scratched at the edges of memory. Before I could answer, the front door opened again, wider this time. My father stood in the frame, jaw clenched, posture tight, like a man trying to hold power that had already started slipping through his hands. "You shouldn't be here," he said, and the tone was wrong. Not angry. Frightened. My mother appeared behind him, face pale, hands trembling just enough to betray her control. Hania stood at the top of the stairs, confusion twisting into curiosity. The barefoot woman didn't flinch. "I came for what's mine," she said. Her words cut through the cold like a blade. My father's expression shattered for a heartbeat before he found his voice again. "You're trespassing." She tilted her head, her gaze shifting to me. "Are you Ayan?" Something in the way she said my name made the air thicken. My throat tightened. "Yes," I managed. Behind her, the wind howled through the trees. My father stepped forward, his voice rising. "Leave this property immediately." The woman didn't move. She reached into her coat, a thin, torn coat that should have done nothing against the cold, and pulled out an envelope. My name was written across it in precise, dark ink. When she extended it toward me, my father lunged forward so fast that the door slammed into the wall. "Don't touch that," he barked. For a moment, nobody moved. Even the snow seemed to stop falling. My mother whispered, "Please, not here," her voice trembling with something like guilt. The woman's eyes never left mine. She placed the envelope on the ground between us, careful, deliberate. "You'll need this," she said softly. "It's your turn to know." Then she looked back at my father, really looked at him. Whatever passed between them made him stumble a step back, as if she'd spoken a truth only he could hear. And before anyone could stop her, she turned and walked away, bare feet pressing red into white until the night swallowed her whole. I dropped to my knees, picked up the envelope, and saw that it wasn't sealed. Inside, there was only a single page, and one signature that didn't belong to my father. I didn't sleep that night. The motel ceiling was cracked and yellowed, the heater wheezing like an old man's lungs. I laid the page on the bedspread, staring at the signature until my eyes burned. It wasn't my father's. It wasn't my mother's. The name at the bottom was written in careful cursive, Syra Halim. And beneath it, in bold print, were the words, "Executor of the Trust of Ayan Rahim." I read it again and again, the syllables of my own name suddenly heavier. Executor. Trust. Those words didn't belong to the boy who'd been thrown out barefoot into the snow. They belonged to someone who was supposed to matter. At dawn, I walked to the address printed faintly at the top of the page. It led me downtown, to an office of glass and marble, where the world didn't know my family's lies. Inside, the receptionist looked up and asked, "Appointment name?" "Ayan Rahim," I said. Her smile froze for half a second, then she stood. "Mr. Patel will see you now." I followed her down a hallway lined with photographs of polished men shaking hands. The lawyer's office smelled like coffee and authority. He didn't ask how I was. He just gestured to a seat and said, "You've had quite a night, I assume." My throat tightened. "You called me." He nodded, sliding a folder across the desk. "There have been complications with your father's holdings. Certain documents were recently unsealed following an automatic trigger in a trust your father didn't control." I blinked. "A trust? For me?" He hesitated, watching me carefully. "Not from your father, Mr. Rahim. Because of him." The air left my lungs. He turned the folder around. Inside were copies of legal filings dated years ago, years before I'd signed anything. My name appeared in print again and again, linked to assets I didn't recognize. Offshore accounts. Property. Shares. All managed under a sealed trust bearing one signature, Syra Halim. "The executor who came to your home yesterday," he said. "She initiated contact when the final condition was met." "What condition?" The lawyer folded his hands. "Your removal from that residence." The words landed like thunder. My exile wasn't random, it was activation. I looked down at the papers, and for the first time in my life, I felt something burning deeper than pain. Not rage. Not fear. Power. Quiet, patient power. And as I left the office, the city looked different, colder, sharper. Because I finally understood, the night they threw me out was the night I inherited everything they tried to steal. Syra and I sat in a diner that smelled of burnt coffee and regret. The kind of place where people came to make confessions no one else would believe. She wore shoes now, cheap ones that didn't fit right, and her hands trembled as she stirred sugar into her tea. Outside, the snow was turning to slush, the city pretending not to notice two ghosts resurrecting a secret. "Your mother will tell you I'm unstable," she said finally. "She's been preparing that story for years." I didn't answer. I just watched her face. There was something in her eyes, a familiarity that went beyond recognition. It was grief shaped like memory. "She wasn't always cruel," Syra said. "But she loved status more than she loved truth. And your father, he loved what the truth could buy him." I leaned forward. "You said you came for what's yours. What does that mean?" Her lips curved into a sad smile. "Not mine. Yours." She slid a folded document across the table. "Your father made promises under oath, promises he couldn't legally break. This trust was designed to protect what was meant for you. When they removed you from the house, the clause activated. That's why I appeared." I stared at the paper, my pulse pounding. Why would he create something like that? "He didn't," she said quietly. "Someone else did. Someone your father owed everything to." The name she spoke next made the air around us heavy, my grandfather's. The man my father claimed had left nothing behind but debts and disappointment. "He left more than that," Syra said. "He left you." My hand shook. "And you, how do you fit in all this?" She hesitated, eyes wet. "Because I was there the night you were born, Ayan. I was the one who made sure your name went on that paper before they could erase it." The room tilted. The world, for a moment, stopped. Then she said it, the line that rewired everything I'd believed about my blood, my house, my exile. "Your father never wanted a second child. Your mother insisted on one she could control. But the man who signed your first birth document wasn't him." Her words fell like a match into gasoline. Everything inside me wanted to explode, to drive straight to that house and drag the truth across their perfect marble floors. But the lawyer's warning echoed in my head like a mantra: power without patience is suicide. So I did the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life: nothing. I didn't call my father. I didn't confront my mother. I didn't even text Hania. I just sat with Cyrus' words, letting them rearrange my memories like shards of glass finding new patterns. She told me not to rush. They'll reveal themselves faster than you think, she said. They always do when they believe they've already won. So I waited. The next morning, I went back to the law office. Mr. Patel, the executor, was already expecting me. He looked up from a stack of folders and said, "You understand what you're sitting on?" "Barely," I said. He smiled faintly. "Good. Keep it that way, at least for now." He explained the legal landscape with precision, how my father's manipulation of family assets had violated clauses he didn't even realize were still enforceable, how the trust's design favored my existence, not my father's lineage. My silence, Mr. Patel said, was my most dangerous weapon. "Let them think you're defeated," he advised. "Grief makes people reckless. They'll slip. They always do." When I left his office, I didn't feel powerless anymore. I felt like someone holding a secret that could crack marble. Back at the motel, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My eyes were swollen, my skin pale, but beneath the wreckage, there was a steadiness I'd never seen before. A calm that wasn't surrender. I powered on my phone. Messages from Hania flooded in, each one pretending concern, dripping with control. "Ayan, you need to stop this nonsense. You're ruining the family's name. Dad says he'll forgive you if you come home and apologize." I read them all, and for the first time I didn't reply. Because I understood something vital. Their version of forgiveness was just another kind of ownership. That night, as snow fell quietly outside, my phone buzzed again, an unknown number. One message. "Your father knows she found you. He wants to meet. Alone." I didn't answer. I just smiled into the mirror and whispered, "Not yet." The law office smelled of wood polish and tension. Mr. Patel sat across from me, his glasses low on his nose, the faint hum of the heater filling the silence between us. I hadn't told Syra about the message from my father, not yet. I needed to see what this paper world really said about me before I stepped back into his real one. He slid another folder across the desk, and the header made my pulse jump. Raheem Holdings Beneficiary Agreement, 2001. My name was there again. Printed cleanly. Legally. Beside words that didn't fit the story I'd been raised on: controlling interest, succession clause, non-revocable directive. It was like reading proof that I wasn't crazy all these years, proof that the gaslighting had been policy, not accident. "Why does this exist?" I asked. Patel clasped his hands. "Because your grandfather predicted your father's greed. He told me how, decades ago, my grandfather had placed a portion of the family assets in a special trust, untouchable, dormant, to be activated under certain conditions. The first condition, the legitimate heir, me, had to be 25. The second, evidence that my father had violated fiduciary obligations. Both conditions, Patel said, are now fulfilled." I felt dizzy. "So you're saying, my father's been sitting on money that never legally belonged to him?" "Not just money," Patel replied. "Control." The papers outlined holdings in companies my father had claimed as his own, real estate signed under shell accounts, and most shocking, a clause naming me as contingent successor to the trust's board rights. My voice cracked. "But he always said I wasn't responsible enough. That I didn't have the instinct for business." Patel gave a thin smile. "It was never about instinct. It was about inheritance. He couldn't erase you legally, so he erased you emotionally." I sat back, my chest tightening with something hot and dangerous. I thought of my father's voice, calm and cold, "You're not ready for responsibility." He hadn't been warning me. He'd been distracting me. When Patel finished explaining, I stared at the last page, a notarized seal, the date of creation just 2 months before my grandfather's death. "He protected me," I whispered. Patel nodded. "And now you must protect yourself." Outside, snow was melting into dirty puddles, but the world still looked white from the window. Pure. Untouched. False. I pressed my fingers to the document and felt the ink like a heartbeat. This wasn't revenge yet. This was evidence. And as I closed the folder, a question surfaced that chilled me more than any winter night. If my father knew this trust existed, how far would he go to destroy the one person it protected, me? Cyrus' words followed me out of the diner, heavy as the winter air. By the time I reached the motel, my phone was vibrating again, unknown number. My father. We need to talk. Tonight. Alone. I didn't answer. I forwarded the message to Patel instead. He called me immediately. Good. He's moving fast. That means he's scared. Patel sounded calm, methodical, as if we were discussing chess, not blood. Every call, every word, record it. Don't provoke him yet. Just listen. I took notes like a student of war. That night, I sat on the edge of the motel bed, laptop open, paper spread like a map of lies. Patel had explained that my legal standing wasn't just symbolic, it was structural. My father's company couldn't move certain assets without my co-signature. My silence had already started choking his empire. Syra arrived late, her coat damp from melting snow. She carried a small box of documents bound with frayed ribbon. These are copies, she said. Everything your grandfather signed. Everything your father tried to bury. Inside were deeds, contracts, even an old letter addressed to my mother. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate. Protect the boy. He is the key. If they ever cast him out, it will begin. I traced the ink with my fingertip. My throat tightened. He knew, I whispered. Syra nodded. He knew what your father was capable of. We worked in silence after that, scanning, cataloging, timestamping. Evidence didn't just build itself, it needed patience, precision. Every page was a brick, every signature a weapon. At 3:17 a.m., another text came through. From my sister this time. Stop whatever you're doing. You don't know what you're walking into. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. I could almost hear her voice in those words, not compassion, but fear. I turned to Syra. They're cornered. She met my eyes. Then stay quiet. Let them thrash. The quieter you are, the louder their panic will sound. I nodded. Outside, dawn was breaking in bruised colors. My family's lies were unraveling faster than they could weave them back together. And somewhere between the exhaustion and the adrenaline, I realized I was no longer fighting for their approval. I was preparing their reckoning. Back at Patel's office, the air smelled of paper, ink, and quiet power, the kind that doesn't shout but ends dynasties. Patel's assistant closed the door behind me, and the world outside vanished. The blinds were half drawn, sunlight slicing the room into sharp geometric lines across the mahogany desk. He gestured toward the chair opposite him. Sit, he said. You're going to want to see this. He slid a document toward me with the same care a surgeon uses before a cut. It wasn't new, it was old, the pages yellowed at the edges, stamped with a seal I didn't recognize. At the top, the Rahim Family Trust Amendment, 2001. Below that, in faint typewriter ink, were two signatures. One was my grandfather's. The other was my mother's. I stared at it for a long time, my pulse in my ears. She signed this? Patel nodded slowly. Yes. This was the document that gave your father access to what was supposed to be your inheritance. She witnessed it. She verified it. And by doing so, she made herself legally complicit. I sank back in the chair. The room tilted. I remembered her words from the night she told me to pack my things. You'll finally understand your place. My place wasn't exile, it was insurance. I had been the clause that made their fraud possible. Patel leaned forward. You asked me about your legal standing. Here it is. You are the named successor to the trust. The signatures show your parents violated fiduciary obligations by concealing your entitlement and using it for their own benefit. That's breach, fraud, and conspiracy, all provable. The words sounded clinical coming from him, but I could feel their weight. Every moment of humiliation, every laugh, every cold shoulder, it all suddenly had structure, motive, purpose. They'll deny everything, I said. Of course, Patel replied. But denial is useless when truth has a date stamp. He tapped the document twice, then looked me dead in the eye. This is your wall. Build with it. Don't throw it. Outside, I could hear sirens in the distance, city noise, indifferent. But inside, I felt something electric move through me. The shame they'd carved into me was evaporating, replaced by something cleaner. Not peace. Not vengeance. Clarity. For the first time, I knew exactly who I was on paper, and that meant soon, they would too. And as I left the office, Patel's last words followed me like prophecy. Your father will try to discredit you. Your mother will try to rewrite the past. But remember this, documents don't lie. People do. The executor's office was darker that morning, blinds drawn, tension thick enough to taste. Patel didn't waste words. He pushed a file across the desk, and I felt the shift before I even opened it. This, he said, is the weather report for the war you're about to start. Inside were dates, signatures, and banking trails linking my father's empire to a web of transfers that looked more like evasion than business. Shell accounts. Foreign holdings. Layered companies registered under initials that spelled nothing. They're exposed, Patel said quietly. Your father's entire structure relies on control, and now you're one clause away from removing it. I stared at the spreadsheets, every column a confession written in numbers. My father's voice echoed in memory, men are measured by what they build. He'd built a labyrinth to hide his greed, and somehow my name had been carved into its foundation. What happens if I press this? I asked, tapping the clause Patel had highlighted, Clause 11C, Beneficiary Inquiry Right. You trigger an audit, Patel said. Once you do, your father can't move a cent without oversight. It's the financial equivalent of cutting off air. I leaned back, trying to process it. He'll come for me. Patel smiled without humor. Of course he will. But not like before. He won't shout. He'll charm. He'll bargain. And when that fails, he'll panic. I closed the folder and exhaled slowly. Then we let him. Patel's brow lifted. You're learning. I walked out of that office different. My steps felt measured, deliberate. I wasn't the boy they'd thrown into the snow anymore, I was the man holding the matches. Outside, the city buzzed, alive with people chasing their own ghosts. I took out my phone, stared at my father's contact, and almost called him. Almost. But then I remembered the lawyer's voice, let them think you're still broken. That night, I drove past our old house. The lights were on. Through the front window, I saw silhouettes, my family at dinner, just like before. My father gesturing. My mother pouring wine. My sister laughing. It looked perfect. It always did. But for the first time, I wasn't looking in like a beggar. I was looking down like a witness. The executor's words echoed in my mind, use her fear. My mother's. Because fear makes people sloppy. And soon, she'd prove exactly how much she had to hide. Syra met me again that night, in the same diner where truth first tore open. The lights flickered overhead, the hum of a broken heater filled the silence between us. She brought another stack of documents, thin, fragile, dangerous. Before your grandfather died, she said, he warned me. He said if your father ever took control, the family would turn inward, start eating its own. I sipped the bitter coffee, my hands shaking just enough to betray the calm I was pretending to have. So this, everything they've done, it's about keeping the illusion alive? Syra nodded. Your father built his identity on ownership. But most of what he owns was secured through deception. Your mother signed the papers because she was terrified of losing status. And Hania, she was groomed to believe she deserved it all. Her words hit harder than the wind outside. I stared at the folder, feeling my chest tighten. Inside were copies of old communications, letters, receipts, and one that made my stomach turn, a payment note from 20 years ago. The recipient line read S. Halim, confidential. My eyes shot up. You? She didn't look away. Yes. They paid me to disappear. The walls of the diner seemed to close in. Disappear? I was your grandfather's legal aid, she said. And when he died, your father tried to erase the clauses that protected you. He offered me silence money. I took it, but not to vanish. To hide, to wait. Because I knew someday you'd need the truth. I looked down at the payment note again, the amount so large it made my throat dry. You kept everything? She nodded. Every receipt, every letter, every lie. Because he thought fear would keep me quiet. But fear fades when it runs out of food. I exhaled slowly. The puzzle was forming. My father's power was built on theft, my mother's cruelty was a cover-up, and Hania's arrogance was inheritance dressed as innocence. What do we do now? I asked. Syra leaned closer, voice low. They're already panicking. I've heard from someone inside your father's circle, he's moving money, liquidating assets. You need to let the cracks widen. Don't stop him. Why not? Because panic creates evidence. I nodded, feeling the gravity of it settle in my bones. For years, I'd begged for acknowledgement. Now, their fear was acknowledgement enough. Then my phone rang. Unknown number again. I let it ring, but Syra's eyes narrowed. Answer it. I did. My father's voice came through, hoarse, trembling. Ayan, please. Don't make this public. Let's talk. We can fix this. I stared at Syra. Her expression didn't change. She mouthed one word. Record. I pressed the record button without hesitation. My father's voice cracked through the speaker, low, uncertain, stripped of the arrogance that once filled every room he entered. Ayan, he said, whatever she told you, it's not the full story. My throat went dry. Then tell me the full one. He hesitated. I could hear his breathing, heavy, uneven. Your mother didn't mean for this to go so far. We just wanted to protect the family. You were complicated. Complicated? I repeated, my pulse climbing. You mean inconvenient. Don't twist my words, he snapped, then softened again, the practiced shift of a man who'd manipulated people his whole life. Listen, son, there are things you don't understand. Legal things. I made mistakes, but everything I did, everything, was for you. I almost laughed. You threw me out in the snow to protect me? Silence. Then, quietly, you shouldn't have opened that envelope. My blood ran cold. So it's real, I said. He sighed. You think you're untouchable because of that paper? You have no idea what you're stepping into. Behind his threat, there was fear. I could hear it. I could feel it. Who is Syra to you? I asked. Another pause. Then, she's a mistake I corrected a long time ago. Syra, sitting across from me, clenched her fists so tightly her knuckles turned white. Funny, I said, voice steady. Mistakes don't usually carry legal authority. My father's tone cracked into anger. You think you can take me to court? You think anyone will believe you? You've always been the unstable one, ask your mother, ask anyone. I'll bury you in paperwork before you see a dime. I let him talk. Every word was evidence. Every threat was another nail in his own coffin. When he finally went silent, I said quietly, this call is being recorded. He froze. I could hear it, the sharp intake of breath, the sound of control collapsing. You're bluffing, he said. I learned that from you, I replied. Then I hung up. For a moment, I just sat there, breathing hard. Cyrus' hand touched mine, grounding me. You have everything you need now, she whispered. His voice, his threats, his confession. But all I could think about was my mother. The way she'd said I had to sign. The way she'd looked past me like guilt was a reflection she couldn't bear. What about her? I asked. Cyrus' expression darkened. She's the one who made it legal. Outside, the city wind howled through the cracked windows. Somewhere deep in me, a switch flipped from fear to resolve. It was no longer about reclaiming what was mine. It was about ending the lie they'd built me on. Something inside me quieted after that call. Not calm, never calm, but focused. I woke the next morning before dawn, the motel room bathed in that pale blue light that makes everything look cleaner than it really is. My suitcase was still by the door, half open, same as the night I'd been thrown out. The same clothes. The same silence. But I wasn't the same person packing them. I moved like someone rehearsing control, slow, deliberate, detached. I brewed coffee, laid out the trust documents, replayed my father's recorded threats. The sound of his voice no longer made me flinch, it made me analyze. Every pause, every tremor, every slip of the tongue became data. Patel had told me, revenge is noise. Justice is paperwork. So I began collecting proof. Every message, every bank alert, every screenshot from Hania's fake sweet texts, I saved them all. I uploaded copies to encrypted drives. I labeled everything: fraudulent transfers, coercion audio, emotional abuse patterns. My life turned into a case file. By noon, my father texted again. This time, polite. Lunch? Let's talk. No lawyers. The audacity almost made me laugh. I met him anyway. Not because I trusted him, but because I wanted to look at the fear he'd been hiding behind that voice. He chose a cafe downtown, neutral ground, full of noise and witnesses. He arrived late, wearing the same confidence that used to command boardrooms. But now it looked forced, like a suit 2 sizes too tight. Ayan, he said, smiling. You look tired. I sleep fine, I lied, setting my phone to record. He leaned forward. This can all end quietly. You've made your point. Come home. We'll fix this together. I stared at him, remembering the snow under my feet, the locked door, Hania's laughter. You threw me out, remember? There is no home. He sighed, feigned pain, tried to look fatherly. You don't want to destroy the family name. I'm not destroying it, I said softly. I'm just returning it to its rightful owner. His jaw tightened. He tried to laugh it off, called me dramatic, unstable. He asked about Syra, his tone slipping from charm to accusation. She's manipulating you. She's always been a problem. I said nothing. Just watched him talk himself into a corner. Then he said it, the lie I needed him to repeat: there is no trust. There's nothing in your name. Perfect. I asked him to say it again, acting confused. He did. Twice. My phone captured every syllable. When he reached across the table, touching my hand like he could still command obedience, I smiled. You're right, I said quietly. There's nothing in my name. He smiled, relieved. And that was when I knew he'd already lost. He talked like a man reading from a script, and I let him. Every word he fed me was bait he didn't know I'd sharpened. He leaned back in his chair, eyes soft, voice calm, his favorite disguise. Ayan, you've always misunderstood me. Everything I've done, even the hard things, were for the good of this family. He said family like a brand name, not a bond. You mean the family that locked me out barefoot? I asked. He chuckled softly, the sound rehearsed. You're still emotional. That's what worries me. There it was, the strategy. Discredit the witness before the trial. I watched him spin the narrative the same way he'd done my whole life, I was unstable, fragile, the emotional one who couldn't handle reality. It used to work. Not anymore. I stayed quiet. The silence made him uncomfortable, so he filled it with more lies. He said he'd spoken to my mother, that she was deeply hurt. He said Hania had been crying for days. He was setting the stage. Then he leaned in, lowering his voice. If you walk away from this nonsense, I'll make it worth your while. An apartment, a monthly stipend, something decent to help you start over. I tilted my head. Start over from what? He blinked, surprised by the question. From this mess you've made. I almost smiled. You mean the mess you signed? His jaw tightened. Watch your tone. There it was, the slip. The old control bleeding through the performance. He reached for his cup, hands trembling just enough for me to notice. Your problem, Ayan, is that you've been listening to the wrong people. Syra? I said. He flinched, just slightly. She's not your concern. She was never supposed to come back. I waited. He didn't realize the recorder was still running. Why does she care so much about this trust? I asked. His face hardened. Because it wasn't meant for her to manage. She's not part of this family. None of it concerns her. Then why does she have documents with your signature? His eyes flashed panic before he caught himself. I don't know what you're talking about. I leaned forward, my voice barely above a whisper. You said there was no trust. You just confirmed it exists. His breath hitched. The mask slipped completely. You think you're clever, he said, his tone dropping to a threat. You think paperwork will save you? You're a child playing a dangerous game. If you fight us, we'll destroy you. I smiled, slow and calm. You just admitted there's an us. He froze. And I knew the recording in my pocket had just captured the moment my father's empire began to die. I walked out of that cafe trembling, not from fear, but from the electricity of knowing I'd just shifted the ground beneath him. The city noise felt distant, muted by the pulse pounding in my ears. Every face on the street looked ordinary, unaware that I carried something powerful enough to collapse a family built on deceit. I slipped the phone into my pocket, triple-checked the recording. His voice was there, clear, steady, condemning himself in perfect clarity. When I reached Patel's office, he didn't ask for details. I just sent him the file. 5 minutes later, his reply arrived, excellent. Preserved chain of custody. That was it. No emotion, no praise. Just the kind of precision that meant everything was finally falling into place. I spent the rest of the week transforming my pain into evidence. I stopped reacting and started recording. My sister's manipulative texts became timestamps, my mother's cryptic voicemails became exhibits. Even old bank notifications, transfers I'd once ignored, were now highlighted, organized, color-coded, each a breadcrumb leading to truth. Syra helped me build timelines, cross-check dates, verify signatures. She had a memory like glass, clear and sharp. Some nights, she'd go quiet mid-sentence, staring at the snow outside the window, whispering, he really thought I'd vanish. I didn't ask what she meant. Not yet. By Friday, the evidence pile looked more like a biography, my life told through betrayal and transaction. Patel reviewed everything and said, you have enough to initiate pre-litigation discovery. Legal translation, we were about to make it official. But before that could happen, my sister made her move. A public one. She posted a photo on social media, her smiling beside my parents at some restaurant, champagne glasses raised. The caption read, family heals. Some things are better left forgiven. Within an hour, my phone lit up with messages from old friends, distant relatives, people I hadn't heard from in years, glad to see you made peace. I hadn't. I'd just been erased, again. Then a notification, she'd tagged me. A dinner invitation. A reconciliation evening. Public, performative, unavoidable. The comments flooded in, praise, pity, curiosity. She was cornering me into attending, forcing me into the stage she'd built to humiliate me one last time. I showed the post to Patel. He looked at it once and said, "Go." "Go?" I repeated. "Yes," he said. "Let them think you're coming to apologize. And make sure you wear something simple. Underestimate is the deadliest weapon." That night, I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger, not the boy begging at locked doors, not the man drowning in shame, but something colder, quieter, inevitable. The trap was already set. They just didn't know whose it was anymore. I accepted her invitation with a single emoji, just a smile. It felt like reclaiming something they didn't even know they'd taken. The dinner was at a restaurant my family loved to flaunt: high ceilings, golden lighting, mirrors that made wealth look holy. I arrived early, not to show eagerness but to choose my battlefield. Patel's words echoed in my head: "Let them speak first." Lies work best in full sentences. When they walked in, it was theater. My father in his tailored suit, my mother immaculate in pearl white, Hania glowing like she'd just stepped out of a magazine cover. Cameras flashed, friends of the family, colleagues, witnesses. Every hug was staged, every smile calculated. Hania raised her glass before the food even arrived. "To family," she said, her voice honeyed, her eyes sharp. "To healing what was broken." The table clapped. I didn't. My father launched into his practiced speech about misunderstandings, about how, in difficult times, families say things they don't mean. He spoke like he was on trial for sainthood, every word polished for reputation, not truth. My mother played her part beautifully: small nods, watery eyes, trembling hands that only trembled when someone was looking. Then came the pivot. My sister's smile tightened. "Of course, we've all been worried about Ayan," she said sweetly. "It's been such a hard year for him. But we're proud he's getting help." The words landed like a gunshot wrapped in silk. A few gasps. One relative murmured, "So brave of you." I stared at her, silent. She wanted the meltdown. The confirmation. The proof that I was the unstable one. Instead, I smiled. "I'm glad you said that," I said evenly. "Because healing does take help. Especially legal help." The smile faltered on her lips. My father's hand tightened around his glass. I continued, calm, conversational. "It's interesting, actually. My lawyer says healing is easier when all the documents are out in the open." The table went quiet. My mother's fork clinked against the plate. "Ayan," she whispered, "not here." I looked around at the relatives, the reporters pretending not to record, the waiters frozen mid-step. Why not? Isn't this what family does? We talk things through. My sister tried to laugh it off. "He's joking, everyone, he's always dramatic." I leaned back, my voice still low, still controlled. "Then I guess it's funny that I've got recordings too." Hania's smile vanished completely. My father's face drained of color. The performance had just ended. The truth had just entered the room. My father recovered first. He was good at pretending. He gave that deep, practiced laugh, the one he used at board meetings when someone challenged him. "Always so theatrical," he said. "You should have been a writer, not a liability." The room joined in with nervous chuckles. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin she didn't need. My sister leaned forward, chin resting on her hand, looking every bit the picture of pity. "You see what we mean?" Hania said softly to the others. "He's confused. He thinks we've wronged him." My jaw tightened, but I didn't raise my voice. "You threw me out in the snow, remember?" She smiled. "We helped you find independence." Laughter rippled again, uneasy, brittle. They were performing unity. And yet, I could see the cracks under the gloss, my father's trembling hands, my mother's darting eyes, Hania's pulse beating too fast at her throat. I set my fork down, folded my hands on the table. "Let's talk about independence then. Who's paying for this dinner? The company card, or the frozen accounts?" the laughter stopped. My father's knife scraped against the plate. I continued, my tone still polite. It's strange, isn't it? How financial control vanishes once proper oversight kicks in. Clause 11C, I think it was? A murmur ran through the room. My father's lips parted, but no sound came out. He knew I wasn't bluffing. My mother leaned forward, her voice trembling. Ayan, you're ruining a family gathering. I looked straight at her. No, Mother. I'm clarifying it. Hania's mask slipped then. You really think anyone cares about your stupid papers, she hissed. You sound insane. I smiled faintly. Maybe. But insanity doesn't file legal motions, does it? A relative coughed awkwardly. My father muttered something about drama, but his voice lacked conviction. The control he'd worshipped was crumbling in public, and he knew it. When the waiter came to refill the glasses, my father snapped, "We're fine." Too loud, too sharp. The mask was gone. I let the silence stretch until it felt unbearable. Then, softly, I said, "You know what the best part is? I don't even need to convince anyone. You already did that for me." My sister's hand trembled around her glass. My mother's fork fell to the floor. My father looked like he wanted to lunge across the table, but reputation held him back. The meal ended in fragments, people excusing themselves, whispers chasing the air. I sat there until only the three of them remained, staring at me like I was a stranger who'd walked in wearing their family's sins. And then, calmly, I said, "This isn't a dinner. It's discovery." After the guests scattered, the restaurant fell into that strange afterglow of silence, music too soft, waiters pretending not to look, the air heavy with things unsaid. My father waved the manager away, his smile stretched thin. "Give us a moment, please." We were alone now. The family photo they'd built for the night had dissolved. My mother's lipstick had faded, my sister's laughter had curdled into rage. My father leaned across the table, lowering his voice. "What do you want?" It was the first honest question he'd asked me in years. I took a slow sip of water, just to make him wait. "The truth." He scoffed. "You wouldn't recognize it." I slid my phone across the table, face down. "You lied, Dad. About the trust. About me. About everything. And now, the truth doesn't need your permission." He smirked. "You think some recordings will save you?" "They don't have to save me," I said quietly. "They'll just ruin you." That smile cracked. His voice dropped an octave. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" He reached for my wrist, too quickly, too hard, his fingers digging in like the old days when control was discipline. My mother gasped, half standing. "Enough." He didn't let go. "You're my son," he hissed. "I made you. I can unmake you." I didn't move. I just stared into his eyes until he saw it, that cold certainty he couldn't bully away. Then I said, low enough that only he could hear, "You already tried." His hand loosened, just slightly. I pulled free. My mother rushed in, her voice breaking. "We can fix this, Ayan. Just don't make it public. Please." Her fingers trembled on the tablecloth, the pearls at her wrist clicking like teeth. I nodded slowly. "Fix it? You mean silence it?" She looked at me, something close to desperation flickering behind the performance. "You don't understand what you're doing." "Oh, I do," I said. "I'm doing exactly what you taught me. I'm protecting the family name, just not yours." I stood. From my pocket, I pulled a single folded paper, a copy of the trust document with my name in bold. I placed it on the table between the three of them, the way my father once placed contracts he wanted signed. My mother stared at it like it was a ghost. My sister laughed, a sharp, panicked sound. My father's mouth opened, but nothing came out. "I'm sure you'll have your lawyers call mine," I said. "Just make sure they read every line this time." And then I walked away, leaving them staring at the paper they'd built their lives pretending didn't exist. The next time we'd sit at a table together, it wouldn't be for dinner. It would be in court. The first hearing came faster than I expected. When the notice arrived, stamped and official, I didn't feel fear, just a strange calm that came from finally forcing truth into daylight. My lawyer, Patel, handled the logistics. I handled my silence. That was my new weapon. The morning of the hearing, I sat outside the courthouse and watched cars pass, the city unaware that one family's empire was about to start cracking. Patel arrived in his usual unhurried stride, coat immaculate, eyes sharp. He carried a box of files, evidence that no amount of charm could erase. Inside, the courtroom smelled of varnish and nerves. My father sat at the defendant's table, shoulders squared, expression carved from stone. My mother beside him, pearls perfectly aligned, eyes red, but not from tears. My sister was there too, her phone tucked under her sleeve, pretending to scroll, pretending not to panic. Patel leaned close and whispered, "Don't look at them. Look at the judge. That's the only face that matters." When proceedings began, my father's lawyer did what I expected, painted me as unstable, emotional, manipulated by outside influences. He said I was disgruntled, that I was distorting family matters into legal vendettas. Every word was a performance, carefully rehearsed for sympathy. Then Patel stood. He didn't shout. He didn't dramatize. He just laid the foundation like a craftsman setting stone, the trust documents, the amendment signatures, the breach clauses, the recorded confession. And then he said the line that silenced the room. The defendant stated, in his own voice, that there was no trust, contradicting legal records filed under his signature. Patel pressed play. My father's voice filled the courtroom, confident, arrogant, undeniable. "There is no trust. There's nothing in your name." Gasps broke the air. My mother froze, lips parting. My sister's phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. My father didn't move, just stared at me, eyes blazing with the realization that the fortress he'd built from lies had finally found its first crack. When the recording ended, the judge leaned forward. "We will require immediate disclosure of all relevant documents and financial accounts." A single gavel strike. Sharp. Final. And just like that, years of silence turned into law. Outside, reporters gathered. Someone shouted my name. Cameras flashed. Patel touched my shoulder and said quietly, "You did well." But I hadn't said a single word. Because sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. The night before the next hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the hum of the city through the motel window, replaying my father's voice in my head, not out of pain this time, but precision. Every syllable he'd spoken was a blade turned against him. By morning, the storm had begun. News leaked. Someone in my father's company, maybe a disgruntled employee, maybe someone Patel had quietly nudged, had whispered to the press about the trust dispute. Within hours, headlines bloomed like fire, businessman accused of concealing beneficiary assets. Rahim family faces legal turmoil. My sister reacted first. She flooded social media with concerned posts. "Our family is going through a difficult time. Please pray for peace. Mental health is real, be kind." She weaponized sympathy faster than I could blink. Each post was bait to control the narrative. I wasn't an heir seeking justice, I was a broken son seeking attention. My mother worked the phones, calling relatives, friends, anyone with influence. Her tone was soft, trembling, perfect. "He's confused," she'd whisper. "You know how emotional he can be." It was all predictable. But what they didn't know was that Patel was already ahead of them. He filed new motions that morning, formal discovery, injunctions against asset transfers, a motion to preserve communications. Every call they made, every text they sent, every frantic move to save face became potential evidence. By the time we reached the courthouse, my father looked older. Not in years, in confidence. His posture had changed. The man who once filled every room now seemed to shrink inside his own suit. Reporters swarmed as we walked in. He ignored them. I didn't. I looked straight at the cameras and said nothing, just let them see me, calm, grounded, unshaken. Inside, my sister was whispering with my mother, rehearsing reactions. My father's lawyer tried a new tactic. This is a family matter. It should be resolved privately. Patel countered instantly, fraud is never private. Then came the moment that cracked their armor even further. Patel pulled out a printed transcript of my father's recorded threat, his words, "If you fight us, we'll destroy you." The judge read it once. Then again. Then looked at my father with quiet disgust. "Mr. Rahim, you understand this statement can be construed as coercion?" My father's lawyer tried to object. The judge waved it off. The order for full financial discovery was signed right there. My father's empire had just been subpoenaed. When we left, a reporter shoved a mic in my face. "Ayan. Are you seeking revenge or justice?" I looked straight into the camera, my voice steady. "Justice doesn't care about family titles." Behind me, my mother whispered my name like a curse. Courtrooms don't echo like you imagine, they absorb sound, swallow tension, and feed it back in silence. When we entered for the first full hearing, everything was sterilized precision, rows of benches, the scent of old wood and perfume, the faint rustle of papers as reputations prepared to die quietly. My father sat at the defense table, face pale but jaw locked. My mother, flawless as ever, clutched a silk handkerchief she hadn't used. My sister sat behind them, her beauty weaponized, her eyes red on command. They'd rehearsed this performance for decades, it was their last act. The judge entered. Everyone rose. Then came the sound that marked the beginning of the end, the clerk's voice reading our names, my father's first, mine last. Patel stood, unhurried. "Your Honor, we submit exhibits A through J, certified documents of the Rahim Family Trust, dated and notarized. The defendant's own signature appears on all of them." The judge nodded, flipping pages. My father's lawyer tried to interject, but the judge's tone sliced through his protest. "You will have your turn." When Patel pressed play, my father's voice filled the room again. "There is no trust. There's nothing in your name." The recording echoed against the paneling, the arrogance in his tone undeniable. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. My sister flinched. My mother's knuckles whitened around her handkerchief. Patel waited, then spoke softly, almost kindly. "As you can hear, Your Honor, the defendant denies the existence of a trust he personally signed into creation." The judge's eyes hardened. "We will move forward with forensic financial review and compel full disclosure." My father's lawyer mumbled something about misunderstanding, but the judge cut him off. "Misunderstanding is not a legal defense." That single line felt like a lifetime of vindication condensed into one sentence. When the gavel struck, I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just breathed. The air felt cleaner than it ever had inside that courtroom. Outside, the media swarmed. Flashes exploded like fireworks. My sister plastered on her trembling smile and said, "We just want peace," her voice cracking at the edges. I turned to her. "Peace isn't denial," I said quietly. She blinked, realizing too late that the cameras had caught it. Behind me, Patel said under his breath, "They're unraveling faster than expected." But I knew this wasn't collapse yet. It was the crack before the quake, the moment before the ground gave way. Because what was about to surface wasn't just fraud. It was history. And when the truth finally erupted, there'd be no coming back from it. My parents requested a private meeting, a family discussion, they called it. Patel wanted to refuse, but I insisted on one condition: there would be witnesses. He agreed, reluctantly. "If they think it's just you, they'll overplay their hand," he said. "Record everything." We met in the only place poetic enough for closure, the house that had thrown me out. It looked smaller now. The driveway where I'd once stood barefoot was lined with melting snow, the same front door freshly painted, as if a new coat could erase memory. Inside, the air smelled like lemon polish and tension. They were all waiting. My father at the head of the dining table, back straight, mask flawless. My mother beside him, voice rehearsed, eyes shiny. Hania perched on the edge of a chair, one leg crossed over the other, smirking like she was watching a rerun she'd already seen the ending of. And then I saw the others. My aunt, quiet, anxious. A family friend from my father's company, his face tight. Even the accountant. The presence of witnesses didn't make them nervous, it made them perform better. Sit, my father said. Not asked. Commanded. I didn't sit immediately. I walked around the room, letting my fingers brush the polished furniture. Every surface gleamed, sterile and controlled. It reeked of desperation. Finally, I sat across from him. He cleared his throat, sliding a folder across the table. This has gone far enough, he said. We can end this before it gets uglier. Sign this, and you'll receive a settlement, discreet, generous. The folder stopped an inch from my hand. I didn't touch it. What am I signing away? Peace, my mother said softly. I looked at her. You mean silence. Her lip trembled, but her voice didn't. Sometimes silence keeps what little dignity a family has left. I turned to the accountant. Do you agree? He didn't answer. He stared at the table, jaw tight. That's when I realized something, he was sweating. The air in the room shifted. I leaned back, eyes never leaving him. You've seen everything, haven't you? My father's voice sharpened. I ignored him. You've managed their accounts for years. You know where the money came from. Where it went. The accountant swallowed. His silence was louder than anything he could have said. Hania's smirk faltered. Stop playing detective, she said. You sound paranoid. I smiled. Funny. That's what Dad said right before the judge ordered discovery. The accountant looked up. Our eyes met. And in that instant, I saw it, the fracture. The guilt he'd been hiding under obedience. I leaned forward. You can tell the truth now, I said softly. Or you can wait until the court drags it out of you. My father slammed his hand on the table. Enough. But it was already too late. Because for the first time, the accountant spoke. And his voice was shaking. The accountant's voice cracked on the first word. Sir. I can't keep doing this. My father froze. My mother's eyes went wide, pure panic disguised as composure. Doing what? She asked quickly, but her tone was already breaking. The accountant swallowed, beads of sweat collecting at his temple. Hiding. Adjusting reports. Moving funds. It's all traceable now. My father's voice turned to steel. Watch your words. He shook his head. I've watched too long. You told me those transfers were temporary. That you'd restore the accounts when the audit passed. His eyes flicked toward me. They weren't temporary, were they? Silence fell, thick and suffocating. I reached into my bag and pulled out my own folder, sleek, black, deliberate. Patel had taught me this moment, never show your final card until they think the game is theirs. I placed the folder next to my father's and said, maybe we should compare. My father lunged to his feet, veins visible in his neck. You arrogant. Sit down, I said quietly. He stopped. Not because of my voice, but because I had opened the folder. Inside were color-coded statements, printed from records the accountant had leaked to Patel under witness protection clauses. Each line was a confession written in numbers, forged loans, hidden transfers, payments disguised as charitable disbursements. I pushed one sheet toward him. That's your signature, right? He didn't answer. My mother whispered, you don't understand how this looks. No, I said. I understand exactly how it looks. I just didn't realize it was this deliberate. Hania slammed her hand on the table. You're destroying everything. Do you even know what happens if this goes public? Yes, I said. It stops being your version of the story. She glared at me, eyes wild. You think anyone will believe you? You've always been unstable. You've always. I pressed the play button on my phone. Her voice cut her off. A recording from 3 nights ago. Dad, he's going to find out. We need to make him look crazy before this hits court. The sound filled the room like a verdict. My father's mouth opened but no words came out. My mother reached for her water glass with trembling hands. My sister stood abruptly, the blood draining from her face. My aunt gasped. The accountant looked like he wanted to disappear. I stopped the recording. You were saying? No one spoke. Then, slowly, I stood and looked around the table, the same table where I'd been silenced my whole life. This isn't revenge, I said quietly. It's record-keeping. As I turned to leave, my father said my name for the first time in weeks. Not a command. Not an insult. A plea. Ayan, wait. I paused at the doorway. His voice cracked. We can still fix this. I didn't turn around. You already tried to fix me. Now it's your turn to break. The dining room door had barely clicked shut behind me when another voice spoke, low, steady, unmistakable. I think it's time they heard it from me. Syra. She stepped into the light from the hallway, her coat still dusted with snow, eyes locked on my father. He looked like he'd seen a ghost crawl out of a memory he'd buried alive. What are you doing here? My mother hissed, her mask finally cracking. You weren't invited. Syra's smile was small and deadly. You don't invite truth. It just shows up. My father's chair scraped back, but he didn't stand. His face had drained of all color. You need to leave before you embarrass yourself. Syra walked closer, each step measured, deliberate. Embarrass myself? You've been living off my silence for 28 years. The room went still. My mother's fingers dug into the edge of the table. Hania frowned, looking from face to face. Who is she? Syra didn't answer her. She looked straight at my father. Tell her. Tell your daughter who I am. My father's lips parted, but no sound came out. So she told them. I was the witness your father bribed. The name he erased from your grandfather's will. The woman who made sure the trust you tried to steal couldn't be destroyed. My aunt gasped. The accountant's face turned white. My mother whispered, you liar. Careful, Syra said sharply. Every word from now on is being recorded. She turned to me then, her expression softening for the first time. Your grandfather made me promise to protect you. He said, if they ever turn him away, the bloodline will reclaim him through truth. I felt my throat tighten. My father stood finally, rage replacing fear. Enough of this nonsense. You're nothing but a servant who kept your secrets? Syra interrupted, her voice rising for the first time. Who watched you forge signatures, rewrite names, pay off witnesses? She pointed at him, trembling with fury. I was there the night you made your wife sign that amendment. You told her it was to protect the family, but it was to cover your theft. The words hit like gunfire. My mother's face crumpled. You promised me it was temporary, she whispered to my father. You said. Stop talking, he snapped. But she didn't. You said it was for the business. You said. Be quiet, he roared, slamming his hand on the table. And then, in her panic, my mother shouted the words that would destroy them both. I signed it because I knew Ayan wasn't your son. The silence that followed wasn't silence at all. It was collapse. Everyone froze. Even the air stopped moving. Syra's eyes filled with tears, but not of shock. Recognition. My father staggered back. My sister went pale. My aunt covered her mouth. And I just stood there, the truth burning through my veins, rewriting every moment of my life in an instant. My sister broke first. No, she said, voice cracking. No, that's not true. But my mother was already shaking, her words spilling out like she couldn't stop them anymore. It was supposed to be sealed. Your grandfather, he forced us to sign. I didn't want it to come out. I could feel the room tilt again, the edges blurring. What do you mean? I asked, my voice hoarse. My father looked at me, eyes wild, fury and fear colliding. Don't listen to her. Syra stepped forward, her gaze steady. He's not denying it. Stop, my father hissed. You don't understand what you're doing. Oh, I understand perfectly, Syra said. You used him. You kept him close enough to control, far enough to disown. All because the truth threatened your name. My mother turned on her, shaking. You think you're some savior? You ruined us the moment you came back. I ruined you? Syra's voice was low, trembling. I saved him. He was meant to inherit everything you stole. Then she looked at me. He's your father's son in every legal sense. But biologically, he isn't. The air left the room. My sister's breathing turned ragged. What are you saying? Syra looked at her, eyes filled with sorrow. I'm saying the child your father raised wasn't the one your mother birthed. My mother screamed, stop it, but the words sounded like confession. I couldn't move. My heartbeat was thunder. My father's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. Syra's voice softened. Ayan, your grandfather knew this. He built the trust to protect you from both of them. You were never illegitimate. You were the heir he chose. My father slammed his fist against the table, the sound cracking through the silence. Enough. You don't get to rewrite history. Syra met his rage with ice. History is rewriting you. My sister stood suddenly, knocking over her chair. You used us, she screamed at him. You used me. My father reached for her arm, but she tore away. Her perfect mask, the laughter, the poise, the entitlement, collapsed into a snarl. You promised me everything. You weren't supposed to know, he shouted back. And in that moment, watching them tear at each other, I understood what real power looked like. It wasn't wealth or fear or manipulation. It was truth. Naked, merciless truth. They had built their world on a lie, and I was its living proof. My father caught up to me in the hallway, fingers gripping the edge of the doorway like a drowning man clutching for something solid. Ayan, he said, the word half plea, half command. Don't walk out. I turned slowly. The dining room behind him was chaos, my mother shaking, Hania pacing, Syra standing still like a shadow that finally learned how to speak. What is there left to say? I asked. He tried to hold my gaze but couldn't. Whatever she told you, it's not true? I finished for him. Because you've built your whole life on making truth optional. He stepped closer. The anger that used to terrify me flickered, then faltered. I didn't know how to fix it. I did what I had to. You had to lie about who I am? Use me as a placeholder in your own fraud? My voice didn't rise, it didn't need to. The calm scared him more. He looked around, as if searching for an audience that wasn't there anymore. If you bring this out in court, it won't just be me who suffers. Think about your mother. Think about Hania. I laughed once, hollow. You never thought about them when it mattered. You just needed them quiet. His mask cracked. The man who'd ruled over dinners and holidays looked small, cornered. Please, he said. Don't do this. Behind him, Hania's voice sliced through the air. Don't beg him. He's enjoying this. She stormed forward, eyes wild. You ruined everything, Ayan. Do you even understand what you've done? I understand perfectly, I said. You built your life on lies I didn't agree to keep. Her face twisted, the performance gone. You're not even one of us, she screamed. The words hit like lightning, but they didn't burn, they illuminated. The whole room froze. Even my father shut his eyes, like the truth finally blinded him. Cyrus' voice came from behind them, steady and cold. And yet, he's the only one here who still remembers what honor means. My sister trembled, fists clenched, her composure crumbling. You think this is over? You think you've won? I met her glare. No. I think the game changed. My father sank into a chair, muttering to himself. My mother turned away, face buried in her hands. The empire had cracked, not with an explosion, but with confession. And for the first time I didn't feel like their son. I felt like their verdict. My mother called that night. Her voice, once razor-sharp with authority, was now trembling, unfocused, as if every sentence might collapse beneath its own weight. Ayan, she whispered, I just want to talk. Please. I didn't answer at first. I let the silence stretch, because silence was the only language she'd ever made me fluent in. I didn't mean for it to happen this way, she said. You have to understand, I did what I had to. That phrase again. The family motto, we did what we had to. It had justified everything, the manipulation, the neglect, the betrayal. I finally spoke. You lied to me my whole life. I protected you, she said quickly, too quickly. You don't know the kind of man your father was back then. The things he... Stop protecting him, I cut in. You're not saving him. You're confessing for him. She went quiet. I could hear her breathing, shaky and uneven. Then, softer, you think this will make you happy? Watching your family fall apart? I almost laughed. This isn't happiness, Mother. This is accountability. She tried another tactic, guilt. You'll ruin us. Everything we built. All of it will be gone. Good, I said. Maybe something true can grow from what's left. Then her tone changed, colder, sharper. You don't know what kind of people you're dealing with. Syra isn't innocent. She's dangerous. That caught me. Dangerous how? She's been waiting for this, my mother whispered. You're her revenge. You think she's helping you, but she's using you. Just like she used him. I didn't respond. The words crawled under my skin, but I didn't let them settle. It was the same tactic she'd used all my life, turn everyone into a villain except herself. I signed those papers because I had to, she said again, voice cracking now. I was protecting you from being exposed. Exposed as what? I asked. She didn't answer. I heard her inhale sharply, then exhale through a sob. Goodbye, Mother. The line clicked dead. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A text this time. No name, just a photo, my motel room door, taken from the hallway. Below it, a message. Stop. I stared at the screen, the glow painting my hands pale blue. Outside, wind howled through the parking lot. I locked the door, turned off the lights, and sat on the bed in the dark, every instinct awake, alert, cold. If they'd resorted to threats, it meant one thing, they'd already lost control. The next morning, the world felt sharpened at the edges. I noticed the sedan first, a dark, unmarked car parked across the street from the motel, its windows tinted to the color of secrets. It had been there when I went to bed. It was still there now. The engine wasn't running, but I could feel its presence the way prey feels a predator in the tall grass. I called Patel. Don't engage, he said immediately. Take photos, timestamp them. Send everything to me. I did. He sighed on the other end of the line, that calm, surgical sigh of someone cataloging yet another piece of evidence. They're panicking, he said. That's good. Good. The word tasted bitter. All day, the car followed, never close, never reckless, just near enough to remind me that I wasn't free yet. When I stopped for gas, it idled 3 pumps away. When I took side streets, it reappeared in my mirror. Syra met me that evening at a small library downtown. You're being watched, she said before I even spoke. That means they've run out of legal plays. I tried to laugh. So what's next? Desperation, she said simply. The final stage of every empire. We sat at a back table surrounded by old law books and yellow light. Syra pulled out her tablet, showing me copies of correspondence Patel had forwarded, emails between my father and his lawyer, their panic disguised a strategy. One line stood out. If he doesn't back down, we'll handle it quietly. Quietly means illegally, Syra said. Don't be alone tonight. I looked at her, suddenly aware of how tired she looked. You should go somewhere safe too. She smiled faintly. I stopped being safe the moment I told you the truth. Outside, the wind had turned sharp again, carrying that metallic scent of snow and exhaust. The sedan was still there when we left the library. I lifted my phone, pretending to check messages, and caught its license plate in a photo. Later, Patel texted. Plate belongs to a shell company registered under your father's holdings. Proof. Another brick in the wall. I returned to the motel and locked every bolt. My reflection in the window looked different, less afraid, more focused. If they wanted to watch me, let them. Because every threat, every shadow, every desperate move they made was just more evidence of their downfall. And soon, they wouldn't be the ones watching. By morning, the storm had shifted online. Hania had gone public. Her posts dripped with false empathy, each one a dagger wrapped in concern. It breaks my heart to see my brother manipulated by outsiders. He's unwell. We just want him to get help. No family is perfect, but love means forgiveness. Every sentence a performance. Every word another layer of poison. Within hours, her followers flooded the comments, praying for you, Hania. Stay strong, Queen. He'll regret this. It was brilliant, really. She wasn't defending our father, she was defending herself. The story was no longer about money or fraud. It was about a poor, heartbroken sister trying to save her unstable brother from ruin. And for a moment, it worked. I got messages from old classmates, co-workers, even distant cousins. We didn't know it was that bad. You should talk to someone. Your family loves you, you know. She had turned the narrative into gaslight. Again. I didn't respond. I archived every message, screenshotted every comment. Patel called it digital slander. I called it the final act of desperation. That afternoon, a journalist reached out to me directly, an investigative reporter from the Tribune. Off the record, she said, I've seen documents suggesting your father's company is under review by the Financial Crimes Bureau. You want to comment? I froze. That wasn't public information. Not yet. Who told you that? I asked. Let's just say someone close to your father is scared, she replied. And they're leaking to protect themselves. I hung up and called Patel. He was silent for a long time before saying, it's starting. The collapse isn't just personal anymore, it's structural. Later that evening, Syra arrived, clutching a folder with trembling hands. He's losing control of his people, she said. Someone sent this to me anonymously. Inside were copies of internal memos, orders for record adjustments, payment transfers to offshore accounts, hush fund authorizations signed by my father himself. Syra's eyes glistened. They're eating each other alive, I yawned. This is your proof. Before I could answer, Patel texted again. The accountant has reached out. He's ready to testify. But he's terrified. He wants immunity and protection. I looked at Syra, at the trembling hands that had once hidden my entire inheritance from destruction. Then we give it to him, I said. Everything he needs. Because now, it wasn't about my father's lies anymore, it was about the system he'd built collapsing in on itself. And the louder my sister shouted into her camera, the clearer the silence behind her became. The accountant came to us 2 nights later, eyes red from lack of sleep, clutching a brown envelope like it might disappear if he blinked. We met in Patel's office, neutral ground, no cameras, no noise. He sat down heavily, whispering, "I can't carry this anymore." Patel nodded. "Then let's put it on paper." The man's hand shook as he opened the envelope. Inside were printed ledgers, account transfers, and 3 USB drives, each labeled with a year. He told me to move money into shell companies, one after another. Every year we called it charitable redistribution. I leaned forward. "And you did it?" "I didn't have a choice," he said, his voice cracking. He had leverage on everyone, promotions, jobs, families. "I tried to stop once." He reminded me of the non-disclosure clause and the bonus tied to my mortgage. Patel glanced at me, then at the man. "Do you understand what these records mean? You're implicating him and yourself." The accountant nodded. "I'll take that risk. I can't keep lying. Not after what he did to that woman." He looked at Syra, then dropped his gaze. "He told me to make the transfer look like a donation." Syra stiffened. "To me?" He nodded. 20,000. Labeled as humanitarian aid. I didn't know until later it was hush money. The silence was suffocating. I looked at Patel. "Can this hold up in court?" "It's enough to trigger a criminal audit," Patel said. "Once we file, financial crimes will step in. This isn't just a civil case anymore." The accountant's shoulders sagged, like confession had finally emptied him. "I can't undo what I did. But I can make it right." Patel stood. "Then sign this statement. We'll submit it with immunity protection." When the man left, Syra was crying silently. She pointed to a line in the documents, a ledger entry from 28 years ago. Beside my father's signature were 2 names, hers, and mine. "He's been laundering through your inheritance since the day you were born," Patel murmured. I didn't speak. My phone vibrated on the desk, Hania's name on the screen. I ignored it. Then a new message appeared. "Come home. Dad's collapsing." I stared at the words, feeling nothing. Syra whispered, "This is how it ends." "No," I said quietly, standing. "This is how it begins, for me." The morning of the final hearing, the air felt carved from ice. I dressed in silence, dark suit, no tie, clean lines. Not for vanity, but for control. Everything about this day needed to be deliberate. Outside, the city buzzed like it didn't know a legacy was about to die. When I arrived at the courthouse, the press was already there. Cameras clicked like insects feeding on history. They called my name, shouted questions. "Are you here to destroy your family? Is the trust real? Did your father confess?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My calm was the answer. Inside, Patel was waiting, steady as stone. He handed me a folder. "Today isn't about anger," he said. "It's about confirmation. You already won, now you let the law say it out loud." The courtroom was packed. My parents sat together, but apart, bodies close, souls miles away. My mother's pearls looked heavier than usual, like they were strangling her. My father's face was drawn, pale, his authority reduced to posture. My sister looked wrecked, makeup perfect, eyes hollow. When the judge entered, the chatter died instantly. The clerk's voice echoed, "Case number 4716, Rahim versus Rahim." I exhaled. Once. My father didn't look at me, but I saw the muscle in his jaw twitch. Patel spoke first, calm, concise, merciless. "Your Honor, we request the enforcement of the Rahim Family Trust under its original provisions. The plaintiff has presented verified evidence of concealment, falsified documentation, and coercion of witnesses. We seek summary judgment on the basis of fraud and fiduciary breach." Every word was a nail. My father's lawyer tried to respond, stumbling through excuses, but the judge interrupted. "The defense has provided no viable explanation for the discrepancies in the records." My father's voice broke through suddenly. "That trust was outdated. It doesn't apply anymore. The judge looked over her glasses. You personally signed the renewal clause, Mr. Rahim. I watched the color drain from his face. The hearing stretched for hours, legal jargon, exhibits, statements, but it all blurred together until the moment Patel stood again. Your Honor, he said, the beneficiary is present. He wishes no vengeance. Only recognition. The judge turned toward me. Mr. Rahim, would you like to speak? The courtroom held its breath. I rose slowly. For years, I said, I was told my worth was silence. That obedience meant belonging. But silence is what built this lie. I didn't come here to destroy my family. I came here to end their story so I could begin mine. The judge nodded once, her expression unreadable. Then she turned back to the bench. Judgment is entered in favor of the plaintiff. The trust stands. All concealed assets are to be restored under his name. The gavel struck. For a moment, the sound filled the world. Final. Unarguable. And as I turned to leave, I caught my father's eyes for the first time. There was no hate left, just disbelief. The empire had fallen, and I was still standing. When the judgment was read, I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just stood there, feeling the sound of the gavel echo through my ribs. It was over, but not finished. The clerk's voice faded, papers shuffled, footsteps filled the room. Reporters whispered my name like it had just been born. My father sat still, head bowed, shoulders heavy with something worse than defeat, exposure. The man who once commanded entire boardrooms couldn't command a single breath. My mother tried to compose herself, clutching her pearls like prayer beads. This isn't justice, she murmured to no one. It's revenge. Patel leaned toward me. Don't respond. I didn't. Because she was wrong. Revenge was impulsive, this was architectural. The judge called for final disclosures, documents, signatures, closing statements. Patel handed over a stack of exhibits, the last one labeled in blue ink, supplemental filing, maternal signatures. The moment she saw it, my mother's face cracked. The judge looked up. Mrs. Rahim, these documents bear your name. Can you confirm these are your signatures? Her voice trembled. They are. Were you aware of their contents when you signed? Her mouth opened, but nothing came. The pause was too long. The judge's eyes sharpened. Mrs. Rahim? Her words fractured. I trusted my husband. He said it was for protection. Patel stepped forward. Protection of what, ma'am? Tears slipped down her cheek. Of the family. The courtroom went still. It was a confession in disguise, obedience exposed as complicity. The judge nodded. Then the record will reflect that you knowingly attested to falsified filings. My father turned on her, whispering something venomous. She flinched but didn't look away from the judge. Patel pressed play on the final piece of evidence, the voicemail she'd left Syra, her voice filled with panic and threat. You think you can ruin us? I'll make sure no one believes you. The judge's face hardened. So, you were aware of Ms. Halim's role? My mother broke. I was trying to protect what we built, she cried. The judge's tone was ice. You were protecting theft, not family. And then, quietly, she ordered a notation for intimidation and witness tampering to be entered into the record. My mother's composure collapsed. My father slammed his fist on the table, shouting my name like a curse. Ayan, he roared. You think this makes you a man? You think this makes you better than us? The judge's gavel struck once, sharp. Enough, Mr. Rahim. Security moved closer, but I didn't need them. I looked at him, really looked, and said, evenly, no, father. It makes me free. He froze. The words landed heavier than the verdict. The gavel struck again. Court adjourned. And just like that, their reign ended, not in fire, but in paperwork. The judgment was simple on paper but seismic in reality. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Ayan Rahim. The Rahim family trust is hereby validated and restored. All relevant assets, shares, and properties held under the fraudulent management of the defendants are to be transferred to the rightful beneficiary, effective immediately. The words rolled off the judge's tongue like rain on stone. No drama, no hesitation, just law. I didn't move. I just watched my father's empire shrink in real time. Patel quietly gathered the files. "It's done," he said, but the word done didn't fit what I felt. Nothing was done. Something had ended, yes, but something else had begun. Reporters swarmed outside, their voices clashing. "Ayan. Is this victory?" I didn't answer. Patel whispered, "Keep walking." Through the flashes, I saw her, Hania. Her perfect smile gone, replaced by something hollow. She looked at me like she didn't recognize the person standing there. Maybe she didn't. She stepped forward, reaching for my arm. "Ayan, wait, please." I turned. Her eyes were wet, her voice trembling. "We can still fix this. We can tell the press it was a misunderstanding, say you acted under bad advice. Dad's heart can't take this." "Then maybe he should have used it better," I said. She flinched. "You think this is over? You think the world cares about your little papers and judgments? People remember power, not truth." I looked at her, calm. "Then let them remember what power costs." Her voice cracked. "You're not even," she stopped herself, swallowing hard, the forbidden truth pressing against her tongue. "I'm not what?" I asked softly. She looked away. "Nothing." Behind her, my father was surrounded by reporters. The man who'd once controlled every room now struggled to control a single sentence. "It's a misunderstanding, my son's been manipulated." But the cameras caught everything, the sweat on his brow, the tremor in his voice, the look of a man watching his kingdom burn from the inside. My mother stood apart, silent, her eyes glassy, her pearl necklace broken, a single bead rolling across the courthouse steps. Patel touched my shoulder. "You don't need to speak. Let the documents do it for you." I nodded. But before leaving, I turned once more. My sister stood frozen, mascara streaking her cheeks, hands trembling at her sides. "This isn't revenge," I said quietly. "It's inheritance, the one you never saw coming." Then I walked down the courthouse steps into the sunlight, the cameras flashing like a storm behind me. The empire was gone. The truth was permanent. And for the first time, the name Ayan Rahim belonged only to me. They called me that night. All three of them. First, my mother, her voice hoarse, brittle, almost human again. "Ayan, please, listen. We've lost everything. Your father's accounts are frozen. The house, our home, is under review." I didn't say anything. Silence has weight, and I wanted her to feel it. She kept talking. "You made your point. Congratulations. But now what? You've destroyed the family name." I almost laughed. "No, Mother. I just signed it back to its rightful owner." Her voice broke, a whisper sliding into confession. "You don't understand what it's like to live without control." "I do," I said. "That's why I took mine back." When she realized I wasn't going to console her, she hung up. Then came Hania. She didn't sound angry this time, she sounded small. "I didn't mean what I said in court," she murmured. "We were all scared." "You weren't scared when you lied online," I said. A long pause. "I was protecting us." "You were protecting the throne," I replied. "You just didn't notice it was made of paper." She tried to laugh but it came out as a sob. "You think you've won, but you'll see, money doesn't heal you." "Neither does pretending," I said quietly. The last call came near midnight. My father. He didn't waste words. "I'll find a way back." I almost admired it, the delusion, the denial, the refusal to learn humility. "Maybe," I said. "But not through me." He exhaled, heavy and labored. You've ruined my life. No, I said. You built it wrong. And then, for the first time in my life, I hung up on him. The next morning, Patel called. Transfers complete. The trust is officially under your name. All accounts are liquid and under your control. I stood in front of the mirror of the motel bathroom, holding the phone, staring at my own reflection. This was the face of someone who had been erased and written back in ink that couldn't fade. I drove to the house once more, empty now. The furniture gone. The air hollow. In the corner, the Christmas tree still stood, brittle and dead, the ornaments dull with dust. I stood there for a long moment, breathing in the ghost of everything that had been taken, and whispered, "Merry Christmas." Then I turned off the lights and closed the door, for the last time. The money arrived in numbers that didn't feel real, accounts I never knew existed, deeds and shares and holdings my father had buried beneath layers of deceit. Patel sent confirmation documents, each line another thread untangled from decades of manipulation. But wealth didn't feel like victory. It felt like silence, clean, heavy, earned. I spent the first few days in a daze, scrolling through bank portals, reading legal statements that all ended the same way, beneficiary, Ayan Rahim. There was no satisfaction in it, only stillness. The first thing I did was pay Patel, every cent he was owed and then some. The second was securing protection for Syra, legal, financial, physical. She resisted, saying, "You don't owe me anything." "Yes," I said. "I do. You were the only one who didn't lie." I signed documents transferring part of my holdings into a trust under her name. Her hands trembled as she accepted it, but her eyes shone with something stronger than gratitude, peace. After that, I found a small apartment near the edge of the city. Quiet, simple, unpretentious. It was the first space I'd lived in that didn't hum with judgment. I slept without nightmares for the first time in years. One afternoon, Patel stopped by with a new folder. "The press wants a statement," he said. "I recommend restraint. Let their silence do the talking." "I'm not interested in interviews," I said. "I'm interested in distance." He nodded. "Good. That's the right kind of power." The days blurred after that. The house was seized, assets divided, and the news cycle moved on to fresher scandals. My father's name was still on the headlines, but mine had started appearing too, not as scandal, but as testament. One article called it the quiet heir who outplayed his dynasty. I didn't outplay them. I just stopped playing by their rules. And when I looked at the balance sheets again, I realized something. For the first time, I wasn't the ghost in someone else's legacy. I was the architect of my own. The wealth was mine now, but so was the choice of what to do with it. Patel once told me, money is memory printed on paper. It only matters if you use it differently than those who hurt you. So that's what I intended to do. But then, one morning, a letter arrived, official seal, heavy stock paper. My name typed across the front. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. And inside, beneath the formal greeting, were 4 words that froze the air in my lungs. Notice of competing heir. The envelope trembled in my hands before I even opened it. The paper inside smelled of ink and arrogance, the same scent that haunted every document my family ever signed. The header bore a name I didn't recognize, Halim and Carter, legal counsel for estate beneficiaries. Beneath it, the first line read, "This letter serves as formal notice that an additional claimant has filed interest in the Rahim family trust, citing biological and legal standing as heir." I felt my chest tighten. Biological and legal. Both. My eyes darted down the page until I reached the name. Imran Halim. Halim. My throat went dry. I read it again, slower this time, tracing the letters like they might rearrange themselves. My pulse was pounding so loud I almost didn't hear Cyrus knock at the door. She stepped in, still wearing her coat. When she saw the letter in my hand, her face drained of color. "Where did you get that?" she asked. "It came this morning," I said quietly. "You knew." Her lips parted, but no sound came. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked afraid. Not cautious, afraid. "Who is he?" I asked. She sat down, hands trembling. "He's my son." The world tilted. He's older than you," she whispered. "Born before your grandfather died." I thought they'd erased all record of him. I sank into the chair opposite her. "And his last name?" Her eyes filled with guilt. "He took mine. Because your father refused to give him his." The room felt too small, the air too heavy. "So," I said slowly, "the man trying to take my inheritance is the one my father abandoned before he ever met my mother?" She nodded once. "He has his father's blood, and my anger." I exhaled, staring at the letter. "Then this isn't just a legal challenge." "No," Syra said softly. "It's a reckoning. One your father thought he buried decades ago." She looked at me, her expression torn between shame and warning. "He knows everything about your case," I yawned. "He's smarter than your father, and colder. If he's coming for the trust, it's not just for money. It's for justice." Outside, thunder rumbled somewhere in the distance, rolling low and slow across the city. For the first time since the night I'd been thrown out, I didn't feel victory or grief. I felt something else, an echo. Because this was no longer just about reclaiming what was mine. It was about facing the bloodline my father had tried to erase twice. And as I looked out at the storm building over the skyline, I whispered the truth that had been waiting since the beginning. Every inheritance is a war, some fought in court, others in the blood. I didn't win by shouting louder than them. I won by refusing to speak their language at all. The house that threw me out is gone now, sold, seized, emptied of its ghosts. They said the marble floors couldn't be salvaged after the auction, that the foundation cracked when the inspectors tore through the walls looking for hidden safes. Fitting, I thought. Some lies are structural. My father vanished from the news after the investigation swallowed his name. My mother lives quietly now, a different city, a smaller house. My sister changed her last name. Maybe to escape the stain. Maybe to pretend it never happened. But me? I stayed exactly who I was. Just no longer where they left me. Syra and I still talk sometimes, briefly, carefully. She told me she heard from him. Imran. The other son. The new claimant. He's angry, she said. Angry enough to come. I didn't flinch. Then let him. Because I've learned something about legacy, it isn't who inherits the crown. It's who survives the weight of it. The trust stands. The money is clean. My name is mine again. And yet, sometimes when I walk past mirrors, I still see the boy standing barefoot in the snow, watching the lights inside a house that celebrated his absence. He looks back at me now, not begging to be let in, but making sure I never forget why I walked away. Justice isn't loud. It doesn't roar. It arrives quietly, through paperwork and patience, through signatures that outlive lies. So if Imran Halim is out there, sharpening his case, I welcome it. Because this story was never about blood. It was about proof. And proof always wins. Now tell me, if the people who broke you came back begging, would you forgive them? Or would you make them watch you win? Comment your answer. And if you want to see how this story continues, subscribe.